Chapter 7 Village of Despair. Jack, Jacob, and Emma said nothing as they walked further and further away from the enchanted lake and the unicorns. There was a slight tension in the air between the three of them, and Jack noticed that Emma was not catching either of their eyes. He was trying hard to think back over the last few days and could not remember Emma saying anything about Fronston being in ruins. Was it really as run down as the unicorn had made it out to be? Or was he simply making it worse than it was to frighten them off? But before Jack could ponder any more about whether it was true or not, Jacob spoke with caution in his voice. "Hey, Emma," he asked with his eyes fixed on the earth. "When the unicorn said that Fronston was in ruins, what did he mean by that?" "It's not in ruins!" she bellowed to the silent air. "Like I said to you back at the lake, it's just a very poor village. Okay, yes, some of the buildings look like they're falling apart and could do with some fixing up, but it's completely safe and populated." Emma said no more and began to stride through the forest, making both Jack and Jacob jog to keep up with her. Jack wasn't too fazed on whether or not Fronston was fit for humans. On the contrary, he was quite intrigued to see where Emma had come from. "How much longer till we get out of this forest, do you think?" asked Jacob, noticing how thick still the forest was. "Oh, not for another day or so, probably," said Emma, carrying on with no sense that this bothered her at all. "Don't you think we better make camp or something?" asked Jacob, "before it gets too dark and we can't see anything?" "No, I think we can keep going for a bit yet," she said, starting to giggle slightly. "It's all right, we'll be okay." "Yeah, thanks," said Jacob under his breath, so only Jack could hear him. For a long while, no one was speaking, and all that could be heard was more rustling of leaves and the sound of twigs snapping in two. Jack took advantage of the silence to think back to what Amara the Wondercorn had said about his mother. "You should be very proud of her, Jack. She may not have won the fight, but she definitely put the war on hold for us." He started smiling to himself as he watched an imaginary battle in his head with his mother taking down everything that crossed her path. But just like most of his daydreams, it was interrupted suddenly by remembering what the Wondercorn had said after that. "All that matters is that he is gone and we can get ready for the next one to come along." That sounded like she was adamant that it was still continuing, and convinced that there would indeed be another dark sorcerer of some kind. The thought of this made the hairs on the back of Jack's neck stand up slightly. Now that he was on a journey to find some lost book and weapon that no one's ever seen, with meeting a herd of enchanted creatures that he thought were only in stories, the possibility of a war breaking out at any moment seemed only too real. He was therefore thankful when Emma spoke into the silence, causing his visions to vanish instantly. "Okay, you know what?" she asked, turning to face the boys. "I've decided now that it would be a good time to set up camp. You know, before it gets too dark and we can't see anything." Jack and Jacob gazed at Emma with both their eyebrows raised so far at their foreheads and didn't speak for several seconds. "Or do you guys want to keep walking?" asked Emma to the muted boys. "Nope, no," exclaimed Jack and Jacob together. "If you want to stop, then let's do it." "Wonderful," she said simply. After finding another open patch of forest, Jacob started hacking away at a nearby tree. Emma started laying out the sleeping bags and blankets, which left Jack to put up and struggle with the tent. Wondering how he got assigned to this task, Jack began fiddling around with the poles and nails. He soon learned that if there was a job he hated more than collecting firewood for his father, it would be putting up tents for his friends. Behind him, he heard Emma exhale as she began to giggle yet again. Feeling agitated, Jack rounded on her. "Want to come over and give me a hand?" he said coldly. "Or are you having too much fun over there?" Emma's giggling ceased instantly, as she had the look of fake shock on her face. "Wow, Jack," she said mockingly. "I had no idea you had such fire in you. Maybe training you in battle won't be as hard as I thought." She got up off her sleeping bag and crawled inside the unfinished tent to see Jack flustered. "It's easy. Here, hold this." As she handed Jack the small wooden mallet, she took the poles and inserted each of them into its designated spots. It was obvious she had done this many times before. "You're quite experienced in being out on the wild, aren't you?" Jack asked, watching Emma as she finished putting the tent together. "Oh, well, you know me. I like to travel," she said, not making eye contact. "And there you go, Jack. That's how you do that." They both looked at each other, looking proud of themselves. Jack's heart began to beat rather fast considering he was only sitting in a tent. Guys, came Jacob's voice from the outside world, almost kneeing Jack in the face as she crawled out. Emma exited the tent at top speed. Just putting the tent together, Jacob, she yelled. Oh, wow, that looks good, he said, throwing the wood he collected in the middle of their camp. Did you do that, or did Jack? Well, Jack started, but he seemed to be having trouble with it, so I helped him out, she said, beaming. Cool. Where is he now? Asked Jacob, looking for Jack. Right here, said Jack as he came slowly out of the tent. Jacob stared at Jack with a curious look and a tiny smile on his face. Noticing this, Emma quickly stirred the conversation elsewhere. Help me light the fire, Jacob, she said quickly. Yeah, sure, said Jacob, winking at Jack. Who's got matches? Said Emma, with her hand outstretched, ready for them to be handed to her. Oh, I do, said Jack, pulling them out of his back pocket and handing them to her. Great, she said sharply, and within minutes, once again, the three of them were surrounded by tremendous heat and the smell of burning wood. Now, let's see what creatures we attract this time with this fire, laughed Jacob. Do you think we will? Asked Jack, looking over his shoulder. Even if we do, said Emma, laying down onto her blanket, staring at the sky, I'm sure we can fight them off. Jack had to laugh this time. Yeah, if you say so. It was scary how dark it got so fast. The sun must be setting or already had done so. Anyone hungry? Asked Jacob, reaching in his bag and pulling out 3 sandwiches again. Without waiting for an answer, he tossed a sandwich each to Jack and Emma. Thanks, they both said together. Everyone dove right into their snacks, and for several more moments, no one made a sound except for the chewing of their meats. Jacob reached back into his bag again, and this time he brought out the same 3 mugs from his mother's house that they had used the day before. Filled them all up with water and handed them to Jack and Emma. Thank you, Jacob, said Emma, looking at him smiling. Yeah, thanks, man, said Jack, taking the water. The 3 of them continued eating their sandwiches, and Jack waited for everyone to finish before he started the conversation again. You know, I'm quite excited to see where you come from, Emma. I'm sorry that we won't get to meet your family, but still, it will be good. Don't get yourself worked up over nothing, Jack, said Emma, prodding the logs with her boot. It's smaller than Wrangleton, and there's hardly anything there. Yeah, that might be true, said Jack, now getting himself into his sleeping bag, but it still would be cool to see your history and all that, even if it is run down. And with that thought, said Jacob, cutting across them, I'm in the mood for a song. A song? Laughed Emma. Well, sure, but you're going to have to use the trees if you want instruments. No, I've got this, said Jacob, and for a 3rd time reached into his small bag and this time pulled out a tiny wooden pipe. You play? Asked Jack with raised eyebrows. Yeah, every now and then. I feel that when times are tough or anything, music can always be there to make things better than they are. But we're not in tough times right now, said Emma. Yeah, I know, said Jacob. I just felt like hearing some tunes suddenly. Do you know of any songs? Jack and Emma both looked at each other, shaking their heads. I've heard some, started Jack, but I don't know their names or how they go or anything. Wow, that definitely sounds like you know no music at all. Sorry, said Jack quietly. No matter, you can remember this one tonight. What about you, Emma? Any favourites? Not really, said Emma quietly, still looking up at the dark. Like Jack, I don't know the names of any, but I do remember one involving the moon. The moon, said Jacob to himself, trying to think. Oh, do you mean the owl and the moon? Probably. How does it go? I'll show you. Jacob began to play a low and slow melody that seemed to ring out through the very trees around them. The same melody continued for several moments until Jacob started singing over a different melody in a higher range, which strangely suited his low voice really well. As the night comes and the day goes, the moon shines bright and the owl glows. Flowing with its wings spread wide, the dark is its endless journey's night. Little owl, we hear you. Little owl, we hear you. As night comes and day goes, the moon shines bright and the owl glows. Flying with its wings spread wide, dark is its endless journey's night. Little owl, we hear you. Little owl, we hear you. After singing, Jacob continued the melody for a few more minutes and then silence fell upon them. "I haven't heard that in years," said Emma in an audible whisper. "Yeah, that one's more of a child's bedtime story, but still, I think it's nice." Jacob retreated his pipe back into his bag, closed it up, and finally laid down himself. "So tomorrow," said Jack softly, "we'll just carry on to Fronston, and then once we get there we can figure out what's happening next?" "Yeah, that sounds good to me," said Jacob, closing his eyes. "Right," said Emma with her back to the two of them. And with that being said, Jack was able to close his eyes and rest himself, hoping to be carried off into an amazing dream before the day's hike to Fronston. Jack was walking again through a dark forest with paths going in all different directions. Instead of taking the path that went northwest, he headed down the dirt road heading east, hoping to be led away from any dangers that were lurking on the other side. Immediately, Jack noticed that this path was not hanging over a cliff like the previous one, so this path already seemed like a much better choice. But then, at the same time, this road was becoming increasingly dull. With no cliff to creep past and no fog to keep him alert, it felt like a road that had no intention of getting anywhere exciting, until suddenly the earth beneath his boots started to shake and rumble. Darting around for something to blame the sudden earthquake on, he dropped to his knees, covered his face, only to open his eyes and find that Emma was shaking him awake. "Come on, sleepyhead," she shouted in his face. "Do you want to get to Fronston today or not?" Jack looked around to find himself not in an earthquake, but still on the stationary part of the forest he had left behind the night before. The fire had died sometime throughout the night, and from the look of it, had no chance of being brought back to life. "The fire looks like someone poured water on it," said Emma suspiciously. "Jacob, do you know if anything happened to this fire?" "Let's see," said Jacob, zipping up his coat. "I woke up and I had to go to the bathroom." "Oh, yeah." "Ugh," shouted Emma. "That is gross." Both Jack and Jacob laughed. "Well," she said, getting to her feet, "at least we weren't planning on using that wood again. Right, come on then, you lot. Let's go." Jack was still trying to clear his eyes sleep he still had in them, but was eager to get on the move again. The tent came down, the fire was certainly out, and all their beds were packed up and back in their bags. Jack, Jacob, and Emma ate on the road, and that morning, and like the night before, it was turkey sandwiches again. "How many sandwiches did you pack?" asked Jack after swallowing his first bite. "About 24 or so," said Jacob, shoving the entire sandwich in his mouth. "Don't want us going hungry, you know." "Maybe it's a good thing that you're always so focused on your stomach," said Emma, finishing her small sandwich. "At least you think of us, too." Everyone was in good spirits that morning, and another good thing came from the sandwiches. The trees seemed to be thinning slightly, which could only mean that the end of the forest would be near. Jack was both anxious and disappointed to be leaving the forest. On one hand, it'll be nice to see the sky again and know what time of day it is and what's on the horizon. And then on the other hand, Jack couldn't help but feel being secluded in the forest gave him a sense of being protected in some way. Maybe that was the power of the unicorns gave over the place. But no, he agreed that overall, leaving the forest would be a good thing. The trees were seriously spreading out now, almost to the point where it was hard to not stray from walking in the same direction. Another half an hour of silent walking, and then suddenly they began to hear voices from a distance. "Hey, Sammy," yelled one of the voices. "Help me move this log, will you? I can't do it on my own." "Yeah, okay, Donnie," shouted back the voice called Sam. "Friends of yours?" asked Jacob to Emma quietly. "I wouldn't say friends, but I know who they are. Those two are Sammy and Donnie. They're brothers." "After you, then," said Jacob simply. Okay," said Emma hesitantly. The three of them came out of the forest and instantly saw what Jack considered to be a town that was indeed smaller than Wrangleton. "Ruins," said Jacob quietly. I think what the unicorn meant was to say was rubble. Jack couldn't help but think that he wasn't wrong. Ruins was an understatement. Fronston looked like it had been recently bombed. Emma didn't say anything. There were only 5 small buildings still standing, and even they had severe damage done to them. Surrounding the towers were piles and piles of stone everywhere. Despite all the damaged houses and dusty air, all the people Jack could see were in a happy mindset. "What happened?" asked Jack, trying to sound casual. There must have been another attack, said Emma seriously. Attack? Jacob and Jack shouted together. What do you mean? Remember when I said Fronston is nothing to get excited about, said Emma, not looking at either of them. Well, this is what I meant. But what is this? Asked Jacob. The reason Fronston looks the way it does is because... But Emma was cut off suddenly by a loud, distant roar coming from beyond a nearby hill, and at that point Emma heard someone call her name. Emma! They shouted as they came rushing towards her and the others. Oh, hello, Donnie, she said exasperatedly. How are you? Good to see you. Me? Yeah, I'm fine, said Donnie loudly. How are you? Where have you been? I've been worried. I thought you went to tack them on by yourself. Donnie was a tall, heavy-built boy of about 16. He had long black hair, brown eyes, and Jack noticed a thin scar running up the left side of his chin all the way up to his eye. Also a rather large bow and arrow attached to his back. No, of course not, said Emma, waving at Sam in the background. I just couldn't go through another one and had to get away, at least for a while. Didn't think I'd be back so soon, to be honest. Well, I'm glad you're back, said Donnie, smiling. Even if it is a short period. So, who are your friends? He asked, taking his eyes off Emma for the first time since running up to her. Oh, these are my new friends, Jacob and Jack. They're from Wrangleton. How do you do? I'm Donald, but please, either call me Don or Donnie, whichever you feel more comfortable with. As Donnie spoke, he held out his right hand for Jack and Jacob to shake. Jack thought it was a very formal greeting, and it was rather impressive how tall Donnie actually was. Hi, said Jack sheepishly, feeling his hand break in Donnie's firm grip. Yeah, how are you? Said Jacob, trying to break Donnie's hand. So, what brings you to Fronston, boys? Surely it can't be for the glorious sights. Did Emma miss home too much and dragged you two for the ride? It was sort of the other way round, actually, spoke Jack. I met her yesterday, and I was interested in seeing where she came from. The story was true, but missing out some key elements, like the fact that they were both looking for something no one knew nothing about. Well, all I can say is, said Donnie, stepping out of the view and trying to hold back his laughter, welcome to Fronston. Would you like a tour? Should only take a total of 7 minutes. Emma sighed. Yeah, go on, said Jacob, grinning. Follow me, guys, said Donnie, grinning wildly. Oh, actually, I'll start here in front of us. I'll start here. In front of us is what we have left of our blacksmith shop. He gestured to the large amount of stone laying across the earth. He got out, though. That's him over there, Terry. Donnie pointed out a small, round man with a tuft of grey hair, wide glasses, and wearing what looked like overalls. And behind that, he carried on, pointing out more ruined building, was the tavern. My personal favourite, the Pale Dagger Lodge. The barmaid Rosie should be somewhere. I saw her earlier. Oh yes, there she is. Just over there, sweeping. Donnie waved at a skinny woman with long, dirty blonde hair, had eyes as blue as the ocean, and shining white teeth. Hi, Rosie, he shouted. Let us know if you need a hand, okay? Rosie smiled and waved back. What's that tower over there? Asked Jack, pointing out the tallest tower of the remaining buildings. Amazingly enough, that's well, actually, why doesn't Emma tell you? She used to love it up there. She did? Asked Jacob. Sure did. Tell them, Emma. That's the watchtower, said Emma, trying to sound uninterested. What's the watchtower for? Asked Jack, looking at Emma. But before Emma could answer, there was yet another great roar from the distance, only this time it was followed by a single crushing sound. Those, Emma said quietly. And those are... asked Jack, looking at everyone, even Jacob. They're dragons, Jack, said Donnie. Why don't you see that opening over there on the hill? Jack looked to where Donnie was pointing, and sure enough, there was a small opening between the two hills. Yeah? Where does that go? He asked. It goes everywhere, said Donnie, as they carried on walking through Fronston. But if you travel on it, the first thing you come to is the Dragon's Pass. No one said anything. Surely Donnie was joking. Dragon's Pass? What was that? A land devoted to dragons? Emma never mentioned it to you, asked Donnie, looking surprised. Well, if you haven't put it together yet, the dragons are the reason Fronston is the way it is. Every so often, the dragons do a random purge on the city and crush what we've managed to rebuild. More like when the dragons get bored, said Emma quietly. The way Donnie was talking about the dragons, it sounded very offhand, almost as though they didn't bother him. So why not leave? Asked Jacob, sounding as though he couldn't believe no one had thought of this yet. And go where? Asked Donnie, still waving at passers-by. No one will dare go through the pass or forest, so there isn't really anywhere for us to go. I don't mind it, though. I like the occasional battle here and there. Right then, said Jacob. Anyway, you lot, said Donnie, clapping his hands, I'd love to walk around and discuss Fronston's history with you, but I need to help with the clean-up. Feel free to wander around more, and I'm sure Emil here will have answers for any questions that you may have. Oh, and Emma, if you're leaving again, let me know before you vanish, okay? And with that, Donnie ran back to his brother Sam to help clean up the rubble. Well, said Jack plainly, he seems to know what's going on. Yeah, said Emma, sounding quite annoyed now. He likes to think of himself as like Fronston's king or something. I think he'd be quite good, said Jack. Yeah, if you like pompous. Anyway, said Jack, loudly cutting across Emma, what's our next move? I don't want him following us. We're fine with 3. I think we should get somewhere quiet and think of what to do. Let's head up the watchtower, said Emma. It looks like there's just been an attack, so no one will be up there watching for a few days yet. Come on. The 3 of them looked around to make sure none of the villagers saw them quickly disperse towards the watchtower. The watchtower was the only remaining building in Fronston that was over 2 stories and was not knocked down. It had several cracks all over it, and Jack thought to himself that it did not look exactly safe. Without voicing his thoughts on the matter, he followed Emma and Jacob up the narrow, winding concrete stairs to the top. Once they had reached the top, Jack stared out of the view and saw the Remarkables on one side, and on the right side of the view were the hills and the valleys headed to what Jack thought had to be Dragon's Pass. The stone was solid and cold and absolutely covered in dust, but still, the 3 of them sat down, leaning against the walls, and Emma immediately pulled out the books with the maps inside out of her backpack and began examining them. What do you think, then? Asked Jacob, gazing down 2 at the maps. Well, firstly, she started, it feels like we've been going for miles, when in actual fact, looking at the map, we haven't really travelled anywhere. But we've already seen so much, said Jack, adjusting himself so he too could see the maps clearer. Have we, though? Asked Emma, looking up at him. We've literally seen 1 forest and some unicorns. Compared to everything else, that's hardly anything. Yeah, I guess so, said Jack simply. Okay, said Emma, going back to the maps and pointing at them with her fingers. We're here, in Fronston. There's the forest we just came out of, and right next to that is Wrangleton. Now, according to these, if we keep going the way we are, we'll end up getting further and further away from the black hole as well as Aldor Jelu. Don't tell me we have to backtrack and go the way we've just been, said Jacob, moaning slightly. Jack was on Jacob's side for once. He didn't want to have to retrace their steps and head back into Wrangleton, not so soon. No, I don't think so, said Emma slowly. It looks like the quickest way, and when I say the quickest, I don't mean the easiest, is east, which is that way. And Emma pointed with her right thumb facing outwards towards the right and not taking her eyes off the books. Right then, said Jack, beginning to stand up and getting ready to leave. Let's get on our way. Hold on a minute, Jack, said Jacob, holding up his hand, bringing Jack to a halt. When you say not the easiest, what do you mean by that? Well, said Emma apprehensively, I mean, we can go back through the forest if we seriously have to, only it'll waste a lot more time. Or we take the quick way going east, which goes through Dragon's Pass and takes us closer to the Remarkables. And look at this, if we manage to get up there, the black hole was on the other side. Also, judging by how long it took us to get here, this is definitely going to take more than a few days. There was silence as they contemplated what to do. Seeing as how they needed to think about this, Jack took his backpack off again and sat down back on the cold stone. So, basically, said Jacob, we either take more time in getting to our goal, or we walk right into death itself and hope we don't die. Suddenly, the forest doesn't seem so bad after all. Yeah, I know, but I'm not going back that way, said Emma, regardless of what lies down that path. What do you want to do, Jack? Asked Jacob, turning his head to look at him. Forest and safe, or dragons and death? Well, when you put it like that, started Jack, I don't want to die. Sorted. Forest it is then, said Jacob, smiling. No, hold on, said Jack, now holding up a hand to Jacob, causing him to halt this time. I don't want to die, but I also don't want to take another 3 days going backwards. I can't believe I'm saying this, but I'd honestly rather take the quick road. Who knows? Maybe the dragons will be sleeping, or just not there when we are. Wow, said Jacob, shaking his head. You're so optimistic, you know. Thanks, said Jack, not 100% sure on how to take it. Emma closed the books and slammed them back into her small backpack. Trust me, Jack, said Jacob. You've seen enough once you've seen dragons.